Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on owlscoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, owlscoop.com's podcast. This is Season 9, Episode 46. I'm your host, John DiCarlo, the editor of owlscoop.com. Flying solo today. The rest of the crew couldn't be with me today, but we've got a great episode for you nonetheless. The bulk of this week's podcast is going to be my one-on-one conversation with former Temple quarterback Henry Burris, who, of course, went on to a very, very memorable career in the CFL, won 3 Grey Cup championships there, 2 most outstanding player awards, saw some time in the NFL, and is going to be coaching now at Florida A&amp. We had a great conversation. Henry's just such a wonderful storyteller, so we had a lot of fun here. So we've got that coming up. Quick update on where things stand with our Owl Scoop Summertime Madness Finals. The Scoop, as always, as we say every week, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company is not going to be on your side. You need us, Temple Law grads, who will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win, so in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. That's 215-261-7359. And you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com. That's greenspans-law.com. Our friend Mike Greenspan making an appearance a little bit later on in the pod in the mailbag, has a couple of good mailbag questions for Henry Burris. Famous number 46s, we'll do that this week. We will save on or around this date for Declan next week. Couple that I can think of off the top of my head. Herm Edwards, who played for the Eagles, don't forget, and became a coach, and of course had the you play to win the game clip that went viral. Lee Smith, former closer from the 80s. I think he pitched in the 90s too. Lee Arthur Smith, as Harry Callis used to call him. So a couple of famous number 46s there. As always, if you're listening, if there's one we missed, feel free to tweet at us. We love hearing from you guys. Let's get right to this conversation that I had with Henry Burris. I had a chance to catch up with him back in May through my work at Temple at Klein College. Got to spend some time with Henry because he wound up being the commencement speaker at the Liacouras Center for Klein College's graduation. Did a great job. And as you'll hear here, he really valued his time as a student here. Obviously, a lot of people knew him as a football player. He put up some good numbers, could have put up some even better numbers had he had maybe some more resources around him. But one of the coolest and nicest and kindest people that you could ever hope to be around. And again, it's always a pleasure to catch up with him. Our friend Tom Magnuto wrote a really good story on him a few years ago. Tom's now at CBS in Philadelphia as a producer and a writer there, but we catch up with Henry as much as we can and thought we'd catch up with him this summer as he enters another chapter in his life. Now, like I said, he's going to be the co-offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach down at Florida A&amp. So he literally just moved down to Tallahassee, still unpacking some boxes, and was really kind enough to take probably close to an hour just to talk to me here. So, you know, a lot of you who followed Temple football in the 90s, remember watching Henry. You probably got the chance to talk to him at some events, and you know how down to earth and how personable he is. And again, just a really great human being, super smart, has coached, has done a little bit of everything. And we got into just all of like the key touch points in his life, shared some great stories, and answered some mailbag questions, was kind enough to answer the mailbag questions that you guys send us. Couple via text, couple from the Temple Facebook football group. So a lot of great stuff ahead here from Henry Burris. Again, a Temple Hall of Famer, CFL Hall of Famer, 3-time Grey Cup champion. So just sit back, enjoy this. I'll have a little bit more for you on the other side to wrap things up. Got a couple of recruiting updates for you guys and a little bit of what's ahead with our coverage in the coming weeks. This is a real treat for us on the Scoop this week. So many of you who were at Temple around the 90s when I was at Temple would know this name, and you know who Henry Burris is, a record-setting quarterback. We were in school around the same time, got to see him a couple months ago at Klein College's commencement. Henry Burris joining us on the Scoop this week. Thanks, buddy, so much for doing this. How are you?
Hey, John, good to see you, man. Hey, thanks for having me on, but it's good to be back and talking about the best school in the whole land, Temple University.
I appreciate it. Hey, let me start with that because you were Klein College's commencement speaker. And we got to catch up beforehand, but I mean, to no one's surprise, you killed it. I mean, you're a great public speaker. You've been on TV. I wanted to ask you about that before we get into all the football stuff. What was that like for you, just to come back and do that, be part of that?
Well, I mean, just to have the dean of the school and the faculty reach out and just consider me for that opportunity for me was everything. And just to know how much they support Temple football and all the athletics there on campus, just during our discussions, for me was everything. But, you always dream of that opportunity that you can have that impact and leave that lasting impact and that legacy, regardless of where you are, in hopes that, the traditions or the different mindsets or the people you impacted, they never forget that. And for me, it was everything just to receive that opportunity and to come back. I was a little bit nervous because, getting up and speaking at a commencement, it's a huge deal. And especially in this time now where we need messages of positivity and togetherness. Yeah. For me, it was the right opportunity to come back and uplift our graduates and just tell them the fact that, they came and they survived the years at Temple and learned, from the best and have been prepared to be the best. And that's what takes place as far as throughout those sidewalks and different buildings there on North Broad Street at Temple University.
Along those lines, like I mentioned, before we even get into the football stuff, you've kind of been, I can't remember if somebody told me this or if you said it yourself, you were almost kind of like in your years in Canada in the CFL, you were kind of like Canada's Michael Strahan. You did a lot of TV and you were really successful as a football player. You're on TSN up there. While we're staying on the media stuff to start off, you were really good at it. How did you get involved in that? It just seemed like it came natural to you.
Well, that's what I remember agreeing at Temple.
Yeah.
The old school days of BTMM, broadcast, yes, telecommunications, and mass media. But I learned so much. They prepared me for the real world. And even during my playing career while in Canada, I often found opportunities away from the game to get involved in morning TV during the off seasons, to do some internship work and also to work with sports radio. And each and every year I found different opportunities to step up and enhance my abilities, to learn what the new tricks of the trade were, to work with some of the best in the business, to learn maybe some new insights that maybe I didn't know or didn't understand. But most of the things were just things that you learn when taking reps, just the same as sports. Yeah. And so, down the stretch in my, to conclude my career, I caught on there in Ottawa with CTV, Morning Live. It was kind of almost like the CBS morning show, but, an opportunity came about there. And so I knew with this aging body being 40, 41 years old and, having a chance to win a Grey Cup, I talked my beautiful wife into allowing me to play one more year, but I knew at the conclusion kind of what the bridge for Henry Burris would be at the conclusion of my career and that season. And thankfully we won a Grey Cup. So it was the best way to walk away from the game. But for me, I had to flex that muscle that Temple prepared me for. And that was being involved in the broadcast world and doing morning shows and being involved in sports broadcasting, talking about CFL all the way to college football and NFL football there in Toronto. For me, was a weekly occasion, Monday through Friday, up at 3 a.m., working morning shows till 10 a.m., transitioning on a flight from Ottawa to Toronto and talking CFL football, NFL, and college football all weekend long. And for me, it was a dream come true to be involved in that. But again, it all started there within those walls at Annenberg Hall.
Do you remember who some of your most, I guess, influential or impactful professors were and like some of that stuff? Obviously, football was such a big part of what you did. But again, you were the perfect combination of a real student athlete. Do you remember some of your instructors and professors and the impact they had on you?
Well, I still remember Luke Klein. I mean, Luke Klein, first and foremost. I mean, just for me, even with the tough times, when it came from football games of, losing so many games that we did lose, unfortunately, whether it was good or bad, just seeing his smile each and every day and the direction that he gave me, the positive vibes that he would send my way all the time, just the mindset that he helped produce within myself, whether it was positive or negative, some of the things that I need to improve on in this or that world. Especially when it came from a career standpoint, him and we had a long talk about that. And I still remember to this day, he always told me that, hey, CBS, Fox, those guys will always be there waiting for you. But if you have a chance to go and pursue your career professionally, do not hesitate. Go and enjoy that because this will always be here. But even to, that being one of our last discussions that we had together, I mean, he was always there just to plant those nuggets at each and every opportunity. We enjoyed lots of great laughs, lots of great, just deep conversations. But, he was a man who, helped create the Henry Burris that you see today, the one that's not able only to be a host of a major broadcast morning show in the country of Canada, but to also now be able to stand up in front of young men and be able to present, whether it's the game plan down here at Florida A&M, being the co-offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, but just going through all that training there at Temple University prepared me not only just to be a spokesperson, whether it was in front of a camera, but also on a major stage as a motivational speaker, but now as a college football coach.
Yeah, that transitions nicely into what I was going to ask you next. So we're talking to you down in Tallahassee. You're kind enough to make time for this interview. I'm sure it's hectic. I'm sure you're probably, I'm guessing you're probably still unpacking boxes and stuff. But yeah, you said co-offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. You get to coach your son down there. What's the level of optimism for you? Like you've hit that point in your career, heading into so many different seasons, so many different levels, the NFL, the CFL. How does this level of excitement compare to what you felt in the past, and what do you think's ahead for you? Because I think this is a really cool opportunity, as people know.
You know, the impact that you're able to have on young men. I mean, for me, coaching in the NFL the last 4 years, and now just seeing the difference on a day-to-day being here in Tallahassee. I mean, you really get to place your hands on these young men. You really can leave your impression on these young men. You can really embody these young men as far as empowering them to grow up and not be better leaders, both on the field, but more importantly, off the field. And, you know, the fact of the way they look to me and ask me questions as far as the things that I was able to experience as far as during my journey, I'm not now able to pass that on to them because, you know, John and I, you and I, if we could go back 20 years and the things that we know now, if we could incorporate that back then, just imagine what we could have done in life. I mean, hey, we're doing pretty good both ourselves, but now I have young men that are asking those same questions because they want to know, hey, what would you have done differently as far as within your journey? Because now they want to make sure they can apply those same you know, whether it's bits of knowledge or just processes within their own daily journey to help them make the proper decisions, especially when it comes to preparing and just the balance of weight that they have to navigate and manage on a daily basis, being students trying to be 4.0 plus students, also trying to get their added degrees, whether it's graduate degrees or going for their PhD, which a lot are still able to play today and achieve their PhD degrees, but also be the men on the field to lead their team to victory. Because there's added pressure from both sides. And each and every time I have a chance to, just like Luke Klein did for me, plant that nugget into one of their lives and hopefully grow something special for them. That's what I'm here, and I'm willing to do it. And I'm truly loving as far as being in the position I am. But as you know, I'm just not settled at being a co-offensive coordinator. You know, I'm trying to take it to the top. I want to be a head coach because for me, I've been a part of this game. It's been a part of my DNA from the first day I took my first breath as a young man growing up in Oklahoma. But now I want to make sure I can continually give back and not only make an impact off the field by the young men and women that we're able to impact in our given market, but also on the field by doing something that nobody ever thought that you could do. And then for me, that's always been kind of my vision and focus based on the program that I've been with.
And tell me about your coaching stints in the NFL. I talked to Matt Rule about this when he was there briefly for that 1 year as the assistant offensive line coach with Tom Coughlin. Now, granted, you played, and I'm not taking anything away from Matt, but you played in the NFL for a few years. You had the CFL career, had a big pro career. Even if guys don't know who you are right away, they could Google you and be like, okay, I know who Henry Burris is. But one of the things that Matt told me, and I wanted to see if this rang true for you, Matt said, you know, what I was pleasantly surprised with the NFL is the guys will listen to you because so many of these guys are just fighting to get to their next contract. And if you can literally show them something about their footwork or something on film and just turn on a light bulb for them, they don't always care about who's turning it on for them. He said, I think you'd be surprised that they're a lot more receptive to coaching than people would think. Was that your experience in your time with, with the Packers and the Bears and the stints that you had?
100%, because I know when I was the assistant quarterback coach with Jacksonville for a year, the guys would ask me little bits of it's different questions just to kind of see where I was at from a knowledge standpoint. But to me, probably the most important, I guess, quote that I've learned about, players. And for me, I was one of the players myself, and I pretty much approach coaches the same way because players care less about what you know until they know how much you care.
Yep.
And so
Absolutely.
Once they're able to factor that in and kind of soak that in, that's when they really need to pick your brain. Because again, the more knowledge that they can acquire from you, the more that they want you. And the thing is, the moment you get to where you're wasting their time, you're not giving them as far as the information they need to help them be successful, that's when you lose them. And so for a player like myself, I not only teach from the experience of the play-by-play, but I also teach from the experience of the feel. And especially when it comes to playing the quarterback position, if you can't understand the feel when you're asked to execute certain certain plays or whatever it might be drawn up, and being asked to throw hot with a 3 technique, barreling down, and he weighs 300 pounds and putting his whole body weight on you as far as in the pocket when he sacks you. If you don't understand what the feeling is, it's hard to really teach it and really have that connective tissue with the players as far as on the team. So I'm thankful I'm able to reach into both places because, again, I care about the guys because I was thankful enough to have guys like Steve Goldman, who was my offensive coordinator there at Temple, all the way to Wally Bono, to Rick Campbell, who was my final coach in my professional career in Canada. I had guys that cared about me, not only as the player Henry Burris, which, of course, would be value to them, but also the man Henry Burris. And so for me, they helped shape my career. And the more I can do to these young men, and for me, working with guys like Trevor and those guys, giving them not only knowledge as far as and advice for what they can do on the field to help better them, but also to help start their own families, those types of things, to navigate that, how to manage both having a wife and a new child coming into the family. How did you get family involved? How many hours did you put in at home with the new child as compared to, being able to invest back into football and making sure you still do your job? Because at the end of the day, I'm still a dad. I have to make sure I keep a roof over our head and keep food on the table. So those things are a multitude of things that are very important to players. I was glad with my past experience, I was able to go there and speak from confidence and also have the experience to back it up as well.
And my apologies. I meant to say the Rams, the Bears, and the Jags played for the Packers. I love the fact that you mentioned that Teddy Roosevelt quote. It's funny, like, you came up in journalism and you're taught don't speak in cliches, don't write in cliches. But that quote about like the people not caring how much you know until they know how much you care, like that's translated into my work too. But it really, really is true. Now let's go back. I know, again, people from our generation know this about you, but the younger generation doesn't know this. Tell me about growing up in Spiro, Oklahoma. What was it like there? I know it's a small town. We've talked about this before. What are your earliest memories of just growing up there and just being around the game and how you got into football? Obviously, it wasn't the only sport you were good at, but tell our listeners about just growing up down there and just how football became part of your life.
Well, football is the culture, especially in a small town in Oklahoma. I graduated with 77 people, but for a town of just over 2,000 strong, each and every Friday night, the brightest lights as far as in the entire county were high school football stadiums, and especially in Spiro, because each and every year we were putting out Division I players, having winning records. We had a head coach in Chris Bunch, and before him it was Bill Blankenship, who went on to coach at University of Tulsa, now coaches at Owasso, which is one of the major 6A programs in the state of Oklahoma. But we were those perennial powerhouse, small high school football teams in Oklahoma. If you watch like Varsity Blues, that was kind of the life that a child like myself grew up and experienced, growing up in Spiro, Oklahoma. But, the bottom line was when you were born, people were wondering what position you were going to play. And to know that you had a chance to watch your heroes go before you and pave the way for you, you always envisioned yourself being on that field on that Friday night, making your mom and dad proud, making the crowd go crazy, making the band play the fight song each and every time after you scored. You envision that, just as you envision of being a Temple Lyle, Oklahoma Sooner, Oklahoma State Cowboy playing at that next level. And then, of course, as a kid growing up in Oklahoma, what better generation for me growing up in the 90s, watching a local born and bred quarterback in Troy Aikman, who went to Henrietta High School, who was in our conference, who we beat the brakes off of every time we played them. But the fact to see him go from where he grew up in Henrietta, Oklahoma, to the University of Oklahoma, transferring to UCLA and having the type of career with the likes of Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin. But for me, I grew up in a fantastic era to have those guys that I looked up to be able to emulate the type of a journey that they took and emulate some of the different moves that they performed on the field to help complete me as the quarterback and help me decide what type of player, leader, quarterback that I would be moving forward in the future. And really, I send that same message to kids today to grasp upon those type of men that are ahead of you, enjoy and appreciate their journey and learn from them each and every opportunity that you get, because you're looking at a guy right here that definitely took that type of approach, and look at what it did for me.
And tell listeners how Temple got involved with Steve Goldman. One of my writers from Al Scoop, who's now at CBS here in Philly, Tom Magnuto, did a really good story on you a few years ago, and he wrote this all out in great detail. But tell listeners how a guy from Spiro, Oklahoma ended up at Temple at a time when Temple needed a quarterback. They were playing in the Big East and needed all the talent they could get. Tell people how you ended up in Philly.
Well, it was crazy because, coming from a small town, majority of the schools would always recruit from the bigger schools, and they would always look for the 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" quarterbacks. And here was this small, skinny kid, wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac from Spiro, Oklahoma, standing at 6 foot tall, weighing at 165 or something like that.
Yeah.
But the thing was, they were looking for the bigger body types, the prototypical drop back quarterback. I went to a number of camps, including the Emmitt Smith football camp in Denton, Texas, where all the Cowboys were there. And it was kind of the beginning of kind of the mega camps that you see today, because I think there were over 20 something different schools, and I was able to turn heads. But at the end of the day, they were looking for the bigger body types to get back there and throw, not so much your dual threat type quarterback as far as what I brought to the table. But at the time, majority of my family members went to a HBCU in Oklahoma, Langston University.
Mm-hmm.
And John T. Montgomery, who was the recruiting coordinator at the time, who was recruiting me, said, "Hey, man, I can't wait to make you a Langston Lion one day." But then when he actually came to the house to visit, he walked in with a gentleman named Ron Dickerson. Mm-hmm. And I knew Ron Dickerson from his days at Clemson, from his days with Joe Powell and the guys at Penn State. And, I really, I looked up to the things that he was able to help create for student athletes there at Penn State, and the amount of games that he won, the big games that they were able to win, winning championships, et cetera, et cetera. But now here he was walking into my house with the guy who said he was going to bring me to this HBCU. And he looked at me and said, "Hank," he's like, "I would love to bring you to our school, but you need to go bigger and better than that. You got some Div 1 schools recruiting you, Texas Tech and now Temple at the time." And he was like, "This is the man you need to go play for." And so we set up the visit right away. I get off the plane. Chris LaSala, who's now at Pitt, he was there to pick me up. And again, that's when I met Steve Goldman. That's when I met all the different coaches, including Ron Dickerson. And the rest was history, because just the amount of guys that we brought on that trip, from Alshon Singleton to a number of guys that ended up committing that weekend. I knew with that class of guys that we were bringing in that we were going to make a huge impact as far as on this program that nobody gave a chance. But that was the perfect opportunity for me to really, state and create your legacy. And that was the perfect opportunity that I was looking for, where a place where people said you couldn't do it. And I was, in my mind, was like, okay, we're going to show these jokers that we can do it.
Our mutual friend, Dean Esposito, wanted me to bring this up. You get teased about this all the time. I want to make sure I get this story straight. You looked at Johnson and Hardwick and said, "Look at all the big buildings around here," or did you actually did you look at the skyline? Because I know that Troy, Troy Kersey and Kareem Gilliard, now Kareem Ali, you're still close with those guys, I assume, and they were busting your stones about it. Do you look at J&H or the skyline and said, "Well, look at all the big buildings"?
They were all big buildings. They were all big buildings, John. Trust me. If it was above 10 floors, that was big to me. But it was so many, though. Like, gosh. I mean, but on campus, you had Anderson and Gladfelter. Those are big buildings. And I mean, for me, just to see the number of big buildings that surrounded, that were currently on campus at the time, but even downtown, and just to know that, when I went to a place like New York City to visit, I couldn't even see the sun. Like, for me, that was too much. I couldn't handle that. That was too much. When they call it a concrete jungle, I now see what that meant. But, Philly, for me, it ended up becoming perfect, because there was still that country feel if you went about 15, 20 minutes either direction. But still, when you were right there on North Broad, man, that was quite the learning experience for me, and quite the culture change, I could say.
What facilities Temple has now. Tell listeners that are in college now, young people. And again, I'm not trying to say that Temple has now what Alabama and Texas A&M have, but they're a hell of a lot nicer than what you have. Give people some context as to practicing on Geezy, playing at the vet. Again, stuff you've talked about a million times before, but for people who haven't heard it before, how do the facilities compare from then to now, for what you guys have to what the players have now?
Oh my gosh. I walked in that facility there that they have now, and I was like, wow, this is beautiful. The fact that you have your own facility, number one, and then you look at the weight room, that's a football focus. Everything's football focused in that room. There's all the memories, the legacy of the past players, all in one place. It's an NFL type facility. And just to know that whenever there's a cherry and white game, everybody has one location that they'll pretty much surround and enjoy the moment. It just shows you that for guys like myself, and even when I talk to the old school guys from the Lance Johnstones and the Paul Palmers, all the guys that, from back in the day that, we had this vision for Temple football as far as in our memory banks, and we dreamed about it each and every night. This is what we foresaw, this as far as this program becoming. And for me, each and every time I come back and I see the facility, like tears come to my eyes, because again, as much as you wish you could have experienced that to see where it is today, I mean, it's mind blowing, because our weight room was probably the size of most people's living rooms. And, if you look at it now, I mean, it's like a mansion of a place, when you talk about just the square footage that they accustomed towards building a state of the art weight room facility, the medical facility and staff, just the numbers that they have there now. It far precedes anything that I ever experienced as far as when I was there at Temple. But, again, if anybody has it, you want the future to be able to experience just the hard work that you put in. And that's pretty much what we're experiencing now. But, man, just to see where Temple football once was to where it is today, because I remember Geesey Field, we used to think we were practicing on top of a cemetery. That's what, and people still talk about that.
Yep.
And now you look at the fields that they practice on now. It's grass. First of all, protecting your joints and so on and so forth. But again, they've done a masterful job as far as putting this program together. And again, this program is still young. And to me, so many things are still in the future for Temple football that I can't wait to see what the future holds as far as even beyond where it is today.
Statistically speaking, your sophomore season in 94 was your best. You had 2,716 yards, 21 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. There's always that progression, but you made a big leap from your freshman year to your sophomore year. Aside from just more time, more experience, more film, is there anything that kind of clicked for you, just physically, confidence-wise, where you were able to people really start to notice you that sophomore year, and that's when people are like, wow, we got a good quarterback here?
Well, it's the consistency, and you need reps as a young kid, when you're playing college football. I still remember we were playing the Cal Bears my freshman year, and Reagan Upshaw, who was a first round draft pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, weighing 260 pounds, ran me down from the backside. He sacked me, and he's like, young man, you're good, but you got to get a lot faster. And so going through those experiences like that, thinking that, man, I can outrun 260-pound guys, especially in high school. I blazed a trail by those guys when it came to, escaping any type of, as far as, adversity in the pocket. I could go make something happen. Not in college football, especially Division I. Man, he ran me down so fast. It's like I was standing still or running on a treadmill. But those are some of the adjustments I had to make in the offseason, not only physically, but also to learn from the mistakes I made mentally when it came to decision making, also improve my footwork, work on getting stronger physically from top to bottom, and also work on not throwing so much and using my arm strength. And that's something I work with guys now. It's like when you have the ability to throw with a strong arm, work on touch, work on being a precision aficionado, I like to call it. And so it's all about making sure ball location is perfect, because if you don't focus on those things, you're running into guys like a guy like Aaron Beasley, who picked me off multiple times, it seemed like, all the time when I played him. And I always asked him, hey, man, how did you get me to throw so many picks to you? He said, because I played mind games with you. I got you to think I was doing one thing, but I did another. He's like, I always did it on film, and I hope you learn from it. And that was probably one of the best bits of advice I received from anybody. And still, when I coached with the Jaguars, I ran to Aaron Beasley, and he was like, hey, Burris, man, I used to pick you off all the time. And see, I really couldn't say anything because we didn't beat him. But you know what I mean? You have to go through those setbacks in order to improve yourself. And that's exactly what happened to me making that transition from the freshman year to my sophomore year.
So I want to ask you, we talked about this when you came back, and just hearing this from probably the craziest moment in that Temple football era is Ron Dickerson. So we'll go back again. People who haven't heard this before, October 5th, 1996, you completed 25 41 passes, 445 yards and 3 touchdowns. You ran for 2 more. You guys put up 612 total yards of offense. But I'm sorry to do this to you, because this plays, I'm sure.
I know this one hurts, John. This hurts.
Pitt rallied from an 18-point deficit in the final 8 minutes. They win 53-52 out there. You guys are up 52-47. Again, people from that generation remember Ahmad Lee was stopped for no gain on 3rd and 1. You guys line up to punt. Ron puts Pat Bonner, your backup, in to take the snap on 4th down. He was stopped for 1-yard loss. That came with a little less than 3 minutes to go. Ron comes in the post-game press conference, and he says he's basically going to quit at the end of the season, and says, quote, I lost this game. I wouldn't blame the university if they fired me. This team deserves better, and they deserve a smarter coach than me. You're not just a player on the team. You are the quarterback. Just for whatever you want to share, what was that day like and leading up to it, and just just the craziness of that day. I remember just, getting started at the Temple News. I wasn't there that day, but how do you, all these years later, how would you relay that story to people? Because it was bizarre. And I feel for Ron, he's hard on himself, but how does that all sink in as a player where you're like, my coach just said that? Is that too much? Just tell people about that, because it's crazy.
Well, even before we got to that part, I was still so upset at how we lost, because I still remember in that game at halftime, I said, we got to score 60 points to win this game.
Yeah.
And Pitt couldn't stop us passing wise. And I remember going to the fourth quarter, we had 400 yards passing in that game. But the decision was made that, hey, we don't need to pass it. Let's play defense and let's run the ball and run this clock out and get a win. And I'm going crazy on the sideline. No, we need to keep throwing. We need to win this game. So many teams have been beating us. We need to get exact revenge on somebody. This is our chance. Let's get it done. And finally, when things played out and you just saw the changing of the tide, Pitt would score. They came back and we were 3 and out. They would score again and we were 3 and out. Then we had the big Ben Mayer personal foul penalty that extended a drive and gave them an extra 15 yards. And actually, Ron Dickerson did say that Ben Mayer would lose the game for us. And it unfortunately happened as far as in that case. But to see that happen after the game, for me, I was so emotionally just drained. I mean, I really had no idea, because I had no idea that you could lose a game when you're up by 20, was it 52-33 going into the fourth quarter? Yeah. I had no idea when you're up basically by 20 points that you could lose a game, but we found a way. And it was just the unfortunates of how things went for us at Temple. And yes, it could have been bad coaching or whatever you can call it. But again, at the end of the day, as players, we don't get those years back. And so to see Coach Dickerson take it so hard, you never want to see that happen, because eventually, we were always taught as athletes, you never want to answer the serious questions when you're emotional. And he was clearly emotional as far as in that case. But as a man now, and now a man being a coach, I've learned so many lessons just from walking through those same memories. Because if you know it, John, just a week ago, one of our quarterbacks said, Coach, what happened? You guys are up 52-33 against Pitt. What happened? And so I had to relive that moment. But, once again, I learned from that. And I knew Coach Dickerson, he loved the program with all of his heart. And if he could go back, there are definitely things that you would do different. But now, just as I'm doing for the young men in today's game, in my mind, Coach Dickerson, he taught me something that I'll take with me now as a current coach as far as in college football. But it was a tough moment, because, again, I think that was a moment where really Temple football took a huge dip. But it was good to see the program come back and get back to the success, especially doing the rural area. And it led to so many great years that had guys like myself crying while watching it from afar on TV.
How did he handle that? How did you guys bounce back? I know you guys it's not like you went on to win like 10 games, but when a coach is that emotionally raw and honest and puts that much on him, how did he handle it from that point? How do you kind of like rebuild from that moment to say, like, and what was your reaction when he did it? Was like, how do you bounce back from that?
Well, for us, we have been trained to deal with adversity. I mean, you talk about winter workouts, spring football, just the early mornings and late nights that we had to put in. We often leaned on each other. I mean, and that's what brotherhood is. And that's the mindset and the culture you always want to have whenever you play the game of football, or really any sport, because all you truly have when you're in the trenches is each other. Because at the end of the day, when they put the score up on any major network, it doesn't say Henry Burris, the Henry Burris' Temple Owls. It says the Temple Owls, either won or lost. So we had to lean on one another, because, again, we didn't know what the future would hold. We didn't know when we got off that flight coming from Pitt, would Coach Dickerson still be our coach or would he not be? But the one thing we knew that would be consistent were the men in that locker room. And we had to continue to play for each other, because guys like myself, the writing was on the wall. The sands of time was quickly draining away. And there was only a few more games to go, and potentially a lot of our last games as far as in our careers. And so the best thing that we could do for those types of guys, including myself, was to create the best memories possible and make sure we solidify our friendships moving forward. Because at the end of the day, regardless of how many championships you win, how much money you make, the only thing you can take with you to the grave are the great memories that you had with the men and the women that were within those walls with you, going through the highs and lows. Those are the only memories you truly can take with you from this game.
In addition to, you mentioned like Troy and Kareem, who were some of the, whether they were good players or just close friends, what are some of the names and faces that come back to you when you think of your time at Temple, whether it was on the field, off the field, some of the guys that really just kind of made that program run and fill up your head with memories?
Well, for me as a quarterback, it was always the forgotten ones, the guys that were the big team little me's, but more the biggest guys on the team, the offensive line, the defensive line, the T-Lang Lloyds, rest in peace. And, a number of the guys that, probably aren't here with us today, starting with T-Lang, but I always looked at guys like Drew Pederson, guys who gave it their all, as far as the John Summer days, the Ed Bowens, the Stranicks, all those types of guys, who gave it their all on a daily, but I always gave love to the offensive line because whenever passes were completed and runs by Juan Gaddy and Van Johnson, Troy Kersey, Matt Baxter, just all the guys, I can go down the line of all the different guys that played and as far as, Ramondo and Wilbur Washington. I mean, there's so many guys that Danny Davis that made their impression, the PJ Cooks, the Sid Morrises. I mean, all those guys come back to mind because you always want to make sure that they're all doing healthy and well wherever they are. And you think about them and you look forward to getting back for whether it's homecoming or cheering white, just to spend that time with them. But ultimately in the end, we get together and we share memories. We talk about, just the way things happened during our time, whether it was win, lose or draw. We had a blast together. We worked our butts off. Even if we got our butts kicked, we still gave it our all. But really, like I say, at the end of the day, it's those memories that you relive each and every time you get together. And the fact that, we get a chance to come back and shed some light on our new members as far as being Temple Owls, whether they're new alumni members or current players there at the school. We always try to look out for those guys and take care of those guys in any way possible, just so they can have the best experience, during their years there on North Broad.
So another story that stands out in your mind that's sort of like emblematic of your time there. I mean, again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And I covered it. Like, there were so many games that you guys were in and you're playing against, we could rattle off a huge list of names of all the great players you played against. And you guys were competitive in a lot of these games. And then coaches talk about sudden change. That was one of the things that Al Golden really, really tried to fix. Is there another story that jumps out at you beyond like the Ron Dickerson stuff that's kind of like almost would kind of like crystallize your time at Temple that you think of that you often tell people?
Well, for us, we were always so close, but we never could get the cookie because, there were times where we lost 49-42 to Syracuse. Yeah. We played so many teams close there at the Vet that year, and we put up a lot of yards. We put up a lot of points. And then we thought going from my sophomore year into my junior year would be the changing of the guard as far as in the Big East, us going from being that bottom tier to, hopefully, clearing that fence and getting into the top tier and competing with the VTechs, the West Virginias, the Syracuses, and of course the Miamis at that time, who were one of the big dogs. But unfortunately for us, we just couldn't find a way to change the tide. You know what I mean? But we had a mindset going in that it was time to change the culture. But it just seemed that whenever we got to that changing point, that breaking point to make that play, we just never could make it. They always found a way to make it, and we didn't. And so, again, is that a culture thing? Sure. There's a number of things where you still have to continue to believe. You may have to go to that extra gear to get 1% faster, 1% smarter, whatever it might be. But unfortunately for us, in that junior year, we reflected back to when we played Penn State and Conjana Carter, one of the greatest teams ever assimilated in college football history. Going into the fourth quarter, we were only down by 7 points. And the thing is, we had an opportunity to close it out. But again, when you have a team that's that confident on their sideline, it felt like we woke up the sleeping giant, and they found a way to put the game to rest. Their defense, and we put up almost 400 yards of passing on that game, found a way to make the plays when it truly mattered. Regardless of the fact of how many we played, they made the plays when it counted. And in many cases, that separates the best from the rest. You got to make the plays when they need be, because we always talk about the 5 or 6 plays that can be the difference. And unfortunately for us, we made plays. We just didn't make the most critical plays. Yeah. And unfortunately for us, we always came up on the negative side of that, having turnovers, not creating enough turnovers. And at the end of the day, football is all about time possession, have the ball in your hand. But most importantly, the score on that big board up top of each and every stadium.
We got a couple of mailbag questions here. A couple of these here from Mike Greenspan. He has his own injury law firm. It's been a big sponsor of the podcast.
Yes.
And his first one here is, take us through what it was like playing. You touched on this a little bit, playing for Temple in the Big East in the 1990s against some of the best teams in the country. You just mentioned that Penn State game. Who are some of the other guys that you cross paths with, and maybe whether it's an NFL guy or someone else who really impressed you? And what flashes through your mind when you think of some of the guys you went up against?
Well, I mean, you look at the Big East at that time, it was one of the premier conferences in all of America. I mean, people always said Miami dominated the Big East. Well, if you look back at it, each and every year a different team won the Big East during my time. at Temple, because again, you had Jim Druckenmiller, you had Maurice DeShazo, and the Virginia Tech Hokies led by Cornell Brown, who was one of the top sacking defensive ends in Virginia Tech history, broke all of Bruce Smith's records. And there was a guy by the name of Antonio Freeman, who was pretty good too, who played wide receiver, had a long, illustrious career in the NFL with the Green Bay Packers. He played on that team in Blacksburg. Then you look at Jay Kelchner and the West Virginia Mountaineers. Jay Kelchner, to me, I always called him he was what was the quarterback from the program? Joe Kane. He was the Joe Kane of the NFL, because to me, of the college football world, because Virginia Tech, they were the cream of the crop at the time, one of the most physical teams that you had ever played, led by Don Neyland. And again, he had his off the field issues when it came to substance abuse, but on the field, he was one heck of a quarterback to play against. But people always forget about Marvin Graves, Marvin Harrison, and the Syracuse Orangemen. Those guys were stacked with great players. And then playing against the Pitt Panthers, when we thought we had the game won against them with John Majors my freshman year, and all of a sudden this guy named Curtis Martin comes back in the game, takes one toss and goes 80 yards to win the game for the Pitt Panthers after we had taken the lead late in the fourth. So it just goes to show you just the wealth of talent that we played against in that league. And that's not even talking about Miami, but it's just talking about the wealth of talent across the board, teams that we played with. And to see, the likes of the Miami Hurricanes with the Rock Johnson being the third player off the bench in their interior, but all their first two, the first group and the second group on their defense all had chances to play in the NFL. Probably the only one was Rohan Marley, but he had different reasons why he didn't need the NFL. But the thing was, that just shows you the depth and wealth of talent that we played against in the Big East at that time. And for me, it was one of the best experiences possible. But man, if I could only go back knowing the things I do now, the things that I would do different, and how I would perform and execute and play against those guys. But now I can help shed the light on the future generation to go take on those types of players. And that's what I'm most excited about. But man, that was one heck of a time to be a part of the Big East Conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question Mike had here is, what was it like for you getting that first Big East win against Pitt in that rainy night in October of 1995?
To me, it was when you talk about motivational speeches, I always reflect on that one with Ron Dickerson, because I still remember when he told us to take those daggum stripes off the helmets. I don't like those. And so we were all like, yeah, coach. And then somebody had made some big owl, like a big pottery style looking owl. And he's like, who gave us these? We don't need these. We need to go win. And he took the owl and threw it against a wall, and everybody went crazy. And so we ran out of the field. We ended up beating Pitt. That night, I think we were 70-something percent, 70 to 80% on third down conversions. And it just seemed like everything went right for us on that rainy evening at the Vet. And to me, it was one of the, best feelings ever, because it felt like a bubble that burst, for us trying to finally get that first victory and, truly escalate our mindset as far as that we can make it happen versus anybody. And it did. It gave us a great opportunity, gave us a burst of confidence moving forward. And, to me, it was one of the best memories and best feelings ever, just to see, all the people like the Greenbergs who had supported Temple, the number of different people, the number of different alumni who always showed up for games, in our family there, just to, have that moment of joy and excitement, just to kind of let those years of frustration out and enjoy themselves. For me, it was one memory I'll never forget.
Yeah. So you go undrafted in the NFL draft. Steve Goldman got you a tryout for some CFL scouts. Did I remember this correctly? And I was talking to Dean about this again today. Were you really throwing for truck drivers up in North Jersey to stay active? Is that urban legend, or were you doing anything you could like that to stay active and stay ready?
Hey, John, it's true. I mean, when I walked into this workout, I'm looking around like, holy cow, where the heck am I? And again, there was no buildings. It was just players. You know what I mean? Certain guys had on slacks. There were guys out there in Stacey Adams running routes.
My God.
And this was my workout for the Calgary Stampeders and Roy Shivers, to play in the CFL. And I'm thinking, where the heck did he bring me here? Like, who am I throwing to? And
would you say Stacey Adams shoes?
Yeah,
That's
guys who were in
incredible.
dress
What a
shoes out there
reference.
running routes, with slacks on. They had their suit shirts on.
No
So
way.
they're like, what the? And then at the end of the workout, again, I'm letting it fly. And Roy comes to me at the end of the workout and says, man, you could have threw the go route better. I'm like, Roy, give me some real athletes out here that I can throw the go route better.
Oh, man. Did handling adversity, I would imagine a guy coming from another program may not have even walked into that workout. He might have been like, I'm getting the hell out of here. Like, this is insulting to me. You weren't like that. You kind of just roll with it. Did everything you've been through kind of prepare you for that? Say, oh, I'm just going to roll with this.
100%. Coming from Oklahoma, to have the opportunity to play the game of football was everything you had dreamed of. And I know for me, I always wanted to play professionally. And again, through all the ups and downs, you always wonder, man, why is my journey going like this? Well, the man upstairs, he always has a plan for you.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you're placed in a position to be able to take advantage of a situation, you got to rise to the occasion because you're there for that reason. There's no time to ask about buts and what ifs and all this types of stuff. It's all about show who you truly are. If you say you got it like this, then go out there and prove it. And that's what the game of football and the game of life is all about. I mean, we're all going to be given opportunities to be successful in our life, and we've been blessed with the gifts to succeed in those moments. And the thing is, are you going to be thankful or are you going to be judgmental about the moment? And so for me, it was all about stepping up to the moment, showing who I truly am and truly can be, not only the player on the field, but the person off of it, showing the true character of who I am. And regardless of if I was throwing at guys in Stacey Adams and combat boots, the thing was, I was still going to be me and go out there and sling the ball and thank each and every one of those guys who showed up to catch the balls for me. Just show them that I truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And also I thank the Calgary Stampeders for the opportunity, and it led to something bigger and better because I showed how grateful and humble I was as a person, but also went out there and exuded the potential that I had on the field and showed that I'm truly here for this opportunity. And I'm all dialed in and focused on it as well.
18 seasons in the CFL, 3 Grey Cup championships, 2 most outstanding player awards. Starts in 1998. You come on in relief of 2 quarterbacks, one of them being Jeff Garcia. What do you remember from that day and that time when things started to get started for you?
Well, I still remember in the game that I played, the first 18 plays, they ran all out blitzes on every single play. And it was like, yeah, we're about to baptize this rookie with straight fire. And, but again, just through making sure I found time to study the playbook, study who the opposition was, know the ideology and the presentation of what that defensive coordinator, who he was in the past and what I should be able to see here in the future, putting in that work of what, coaches like Steve Goldman, Chris Bunch, my high school coach, how they taught me how to prepare for each and every opponent that I was up against, not only to get to know the personnel on the side, but also get to know the mindset of the guy who's calling the plays and also setting the direction for this defense. And I did just that. And to me, the czar of the pressure of pressure, whether it's blitzes, secondary pressures, a guy named Don Matthews, a lot of the NFL and Canadian and college football stuff that you see when it comes from pressures came from that man. And he showed it from every different presentation, 6, 7, 8 men on the line of scrimmage, running simulated pressures to, running all types of different coverages from different looks on the back end. But, having the opportunity to study a guy like that helped me to be prepared for that moment. And when I got out there, all I did was make the play, stay cool, calm, and collected, even though I did have an interception. But when the moment presented itself, I was able to cash in because of my discipline and dedication to the craft and fabric. I was able to pop in and, like we said, making those plays when the time is right, those critical plays in the moments that didn't happen for me at Temple, all of a sudden started to come together for me when I got to Canada and played for Calgary and the number of teams that I played for.
That's cool to hear because, again, not telling you anything you don't know, so much of what people think is new is actually old. I'm hearing you talk about simulated pressures, and I feel like some programs it's kind of in vogue again. I know DJ Elliott was doing a lot of it a couple seasons ago here at Temple and with some good success. When you see stuff kind of like come and go with coaching, do you look back and think, I remember seeing that. This just has a twist on it. Is coaches talk about how a lot of stuff kind of gets recycled. Do you still find that to be true with you see something, an old concept with a new twist on it?
Oh, 100%. Because, the thing people have to understand is people didn't just create these ideas out of nowhere. They had to come from somewhere. You had to get the idea of how to truly execute it on a player-to-player basis and be able to break it down in detail. I mean, if you just made this up out of thin air, good luck to you because somebody had to get hurt or injured during the process of actually creating that concept. But I remember I was watching something one day and they were talking about how Chip Kelly came up to Canada and learned the RPO and the zone read, et cetera. But I remember for me back in the 90s, we ran zone read, we ran RPO, and we ran so many different concepts off of that as far as pass pattern wise. I still haven't seen a number of those different patterns and combinations that we ran in Canada that still haven't been introduced down here. And you already know I have those in the book. Mike Pretty, you know what I mean? I still have those in the book to be able to use it, when the time is right. But the thing was, yeah, it all started somewhere. And just with the creativity of the Canadian game and having that extra player on both sides, it allows you to try different things, both offensively and defensively. And so now when I'm talking with my staff here and working with the guys, both offensively and defensively, I'm able to introduce some of the things that gave me problems. It was hard to recognize based on certain pre-snap looks and certain coverages that are hard to diagnose, especially when it comes to offenses that require a both man zone type read. It's able, this makes, it allows the quarterback to hold the ball a tick longer, which is all a defensive line needs to be able to get home to make that big sack or whatever it might be to kind of change the momentum of a game. So, yeah, it all started somewhere, and people have to understand that, hey, when you watch all types of football, it really doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's still football, and there's still 5 offensive linemen, a quarterback, and there are concepts that have to be executed, and there's always a defense trying to stop the offense. And if you can find good plays, regardless of what the league is, that's what the game is all about, because you're watching guys who are truly artists on all sides of the ball try to create that one concept that can make the difference and be a game breaker, not only for their team, but for the entire game.
Obviously, you go on to become one of the greatest players in CFL history, a Hall of Famer, but you can also look back and say you did get to the NFL. And there are some guys that get drafted in the first round that never see the field, that flame out. They're fairly or unfairly, they're labeled busts. And you got to play in the NFL for a couple seasons and you saw the field. What do you take from that time? Again, what are the names and faces that come back to you in the moments from that time in the NFL?
Well, of course, Brett Favre, Doug Pederson, all the quarterbacks that I've worked with, Jim Miller, Chris Chandler, just working with those guys. I mean, they taught me so much. I got to learn the good and the bad of things to do. But to be around a guy like Brett, for me, reminded me a lot like myself with the playing style, having that gunslinger mentality and how to go out there and just let it fly. But again, even during that time being with them, I had to understand how to manage it. And even though I didn't get an opportunity to play, because again, I was just a snotty-nosed young kid still trying to find out who my true identity was as a quarterback, but still just remembering the things that they taught me, the stacks of notes that I've taken, notebooks full of notes that I've taken while watching those gentlemen play. I carried that with me forever. And ultimately being around those guys helped shape Henry Burris to be the type of guy that he is, not only on the field, but off the field. But I learned so much to them, to the fact that when relationships come full circle, I ended up being the assistant quarterback coach and quality control with Doug Pederson, who I backed up in Green Bay during that time. Because of the great relationship that we had, it led to future opportunities in my growth now and becoming the coach that I currently am here at this moment. So, I continue to just be a sponge, and just as I was as a young guy, I tell all young athletes, regardless of the sport that you play, keep your mouth closed and do what you're told to do and be a sponge and just absorb all that knowledge and information that the old heads, men and women, are able to share with you, because again, it's going to become beneficial for you, and it doesn't cost you a dime because you've already earned the opportunity to be there and be on the same playing field and surface with some of the best athletes that have ever been created. Now take the time to learn before you go out and start to invest and show everybody who you truly are, because if you do pay attention, there might be that tidbit that can make you the best possible. But if you don't, it can make you the worst ever as well.
Absolutely. Once the Bears relegated you to the Berlin Thunder, that prompted you to go back to CFL. Is that when you kind of settled in and said, all right, this is my path. I'm going to go back up to the CFL and be the best damn quarterback that I can be? Is that kind of, again, easy for me to say from the outside looking in, but was that kind of your moment of saying, all right, I'm going to attack this? Not that you didn't before, but I'm really going to attack this full on now and just be the best player up in that country.
100%, because not playing that year in Green Bay, because nobody played behind Brett Favre.
Right.
And then going to Chicago and, playing spot duty here and there, then having the knee injury while in Europe, it just told me that I can't continue to sit down here and sputter around. Like, I just want to play. I didn't care where, I just wanted to play. And to me, if it wasn't the NFL, it had to be Canada, because, a lot of my all-time greats, had the opportunities to play in Canada, including Doug, Doug Williams had a chance to play there at Tulsa with the Tulsa Outlaws. But then you look at, of course, Warren Moon, who was my all-time favorite. Of course, Damon Allen, who was another guy who, had a Damon Allen's younger brother who had the same prolific type skills, being a dual threat. Kind of one of the all-time greats for me was Bernie Custis, a young man who grew up in the U.S., didn't have a chance to play, but had a chance to go to Canada and show who he truly was. So I had a chance to be able to follow in the footsteps of all those gentlemen who paved the way for guys like myself. But all the things that I learned from the guys who helped pave the way for me helped lead to me now helping the next generation, as far as reach those dreams and goals. But yeah, after I had that injury in NFL Europe, it was like, why do I keep doing this to myself? Go to Canada and enjoy yourself, because it's a place where not only you can play the game that you love, but you can make good money as a quarterback and earn a quite substantial career and, have a lot of good earnings too, because again, you still got a family you got to feed and put food on the table. And it provided that for me long term.
Would it be easy to say from the outside looking in, of all the Grey Cups that 2016 won, was that the most rewarding one just because of everything that you went through? And if, again, for people who maybe aren't as familiar with your career, can you just take them through that? Even just reading about it, it's fun to read about because there's a story arc, but you dealt with so much pain. It's like something out of a movie. Was that the most rewarding one because of everything you went through?
100%. And one thing that people who know me understand my mindset is that when you tell me that something is impossible, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And so when I won the one in Calgary, it was all about defining who I was. I can be mentioned amongst the Titans now. But for me to solidify that was doing it in a place where people said there was no chance you could do it. Because Ottawa was an expansion team. And in 3 years, we went to back-to-back Grey Cups. But to be able to turn a team around who had won a championship or brought a Grey Cup to that city in 40 years, you talk about writing a legacy and rewriting the culture of an entire market. It doesn't get any better than that. Those were the visions that I had at going to Temple, was turning it around. I remember when I saw ESPN Game Day in Philly, I cried. I cried like a baby because all those emotions came together, the entire journey, having the injury in the pregame, playing against my old team that told me I couldn't do it. For me, it was the perfect moment to kind of put the stake right into the heart of kind of what I wanted my journey to be all about. Because for so many people out there who people tell you can't do something, I proved them wrong, and I know you can. So if I can do it, this snotty-nosed Gap 2 kid from Oklahoma, I know you can get it done. So hopefully if you haven't had a chance, just go Google it or YouTube it, and you'll see the conclusion and the signature to my football story. But really on the coaching side, it's just beginning.
You went back for their opener recently, right? Last month. What was that? What was that like?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, they honored the family and I, of course they retired my number and all that type of stuff. But to be back and just to truly feel how much people loved you there and loved the things that you've done, the people that we impacted, the friends that we call family that are still there. I mean, for us, it was an opportunity to go back to where my kids, my wife, we all had grown together. And so for us, it was a homecoming in so many different ways, and to go back and just see everybody face to face. And of course, many people are like, hey, are you going to come back? Are you going to come back? But for us, that's one of our homes, right along with Philly. Ottawa will always be known as home for us. And who knows, maybe one day we can come back to Philly and make a big impact there wearing the cherry and white and helping lead Temple to something special. But, it's always good to know that you're always remembered and you hope to continue to leave a legacy, but you only hope it's the beginning of the legacy that you can create moving forward and really, truly impact more people on top of that.
Did you get to connect with Raquel Armstead when you were up there? Did you see him?
Yeah, I saw Rock because I had Rock actually while we were in Jacksonville. He was one of our running backs at the time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. You talk about a guy who's been through, COVID nearly killed him. And it was just that time where it was just scary. And you saw what it could physically do to a guy who was in peak physical condition. He was a really good back here, as you know. What's it like to connect with him and see him like still trucking along? Because what he went through, just reading about it, it's scary.
Well, it seems like Ottawa, they love recruiting Temple Owls because we had a number of Temple Owls. And to see Rock there, man, for me was just a breath of fresh air because, like you mentioned, all that young man's went through from COVID to today, he's always stayed who he is. He's always stayed authentic. And to see him out there playing each and every game, giving it his all, you can definitely tell that there's a much deeper passion and fire burning that a lot of people it just doesn't exist in people. But to see a young man who's such a good person on top of that, is built with such character, even despite all that he's been through, the yeses and the nos, the near life death experiences that he's been through, it's great to see a young man like himself, finally receiving truly everything that he sacrificed for. And that's his love for the game. And so each and every time that the game comes on, whether it's on CFL Plus or on CBS Sports Network, for those Owl fans out there, hey, just know when the Ottawa Red Blacks are on, make sure you tune in because Raquel, he's going to be out there giving it his all, trying to do everything to help the Ottawa Red Blacks achieve victory. And, it's just great to see that young man finally getting his just due, and he's definitely making it cash in.
I wanted to pay tribute to your wife, Nicole, who obviously was a hell of a lacrosse player at Temple. And I'm thinking 2020 had to be a heck of a year for your family, right? That was the year she was inducted into Temple's Hall of Fame. You're inducted into the CFL Hall of Fame. Before we can get to that, Tell us a story about how you guys met. I just always like hearing about that because you guys, again, just from the outside looking at it, looks like you have an amazing relationship and you guys have moved around. I have to imagine that takes so much sacrifice and you've got two great minds working at this. How are we going to live here? How are we going to move our kids around? That doesn't just happen easily. Tell us about her, what you love about her, and how you guys met when you were at Temple.
Well, one thing about us, we became best friends through it all. And, she was a person who helped put, Band-Aids on my wounds whenever, I was playing at Temple due to the fact that it was more the emotional wounds, giving me pep talks and all that type of stuff. But, it's the type of person that you need by your side as far as when you're going through that type of experience. And again, we really didn't have like that relationship, but in the back of our minds, we knew, and I knew in my mind, I was like, yeah, she's definitely going to be the one for me as far as when that time comes. But, when you have friendships and you're able to gain that type of relationship, that's what it's all about. But I always tell people I was her groupie because again, she was on the team that was winning. I mean, they were going to Final Fours and kicking butt in lacrosse. And, they had some of the, best players that ever played that game, with the Chemnikov sisters, the twins.
Claudia and Alex. They went to the Final Four one year, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And Jen Eden's a number of different players on that team. I mean, they were stacked as far as with good players. And, just to be around their winning culture and to see the things that they were doing to be successful, that's the type of I guess it's very kinetic because it draws you to it and you want to see kind of what's the flavor of their sauce that's allowing them to win. And so for me, I wanted to embody kind of, their culture and the attitudes that they had just to carry it over into our room. But just during kind of that transition and getting to know her as a person, things led to bigger and better opportunities for us, not only just as being friends, but from a relationship standpoint, because even when I went to Canada, we always stayed in touch and anything I could do for her, I would do it from afar. Any pep talks or whatever I needed, we always stayed in touch. And again, it's always about no matter where you go and no matter what you're doing, if something's meant to be, it's meant to be. And I still remember after practice one day when I'm playing with the Packers, I call her up. And I said, hey, man, why are we kidding ourselves, man? We need to go ahead and make this happen. And it was funny because right after that, I ended up coming to Chicago, which led to the Philadelphia NBA All-Star Weekend that was held at the Apollo. And so we ended up coming there, sharing a good time with all of our old Temple friends. Dean was there. A number her teammates all came out. A lot of Temple people were there that night at the NBA All-Star game at the Apollo. And that was kind of the beginning of where we are today, which kind of led to the reason why we needed to make this happen and eventually got married in 2004. So, Temple love, it's real, man. If you can make it through Temple, and it'll prepare you for life in more ways than one. And it definitely gave me the blessing, the most outstanding blessing in my life is Nicole and now our two boys to go with that.
And tell me about your two sons, one of whom you're going to get to coach now down there at Florida A&M.
Yeah, Armand and Barron, they were two hockey players in Canada, had a couple of brothers out there skating on the ice. And it's still funny. We were at City Hall there, in Philly. And, you got everybody out there skating. Here comes these two brothers out there turning, doing circles and pirouettes and all this stuff. And everybody's like, hold up, where'd this come from? For me, it's just hilarious. But, to have two Canadian sons and to see them make the transition after the pandemic. And the tough part that a lot of people don't know is when I started my coaching stint with the Bears in 2020, here for the entire season, we couldn't get to each other because Canada was on complete lockdown.
Yeah.
I saw them for 14 days throughout the course of 182 days.
That's crazy.
And it was tough. And to know that they were locked in their houses in Canada and only one person could leave at a time. And when they came up and went back, they got quarantined for 2 weeks. So we went through some trying times. And then all the moves that we've made, but our boys have been excellent. They've been a blessing for us both. And to see them both making the transitions from playing hockey to now playing football, basketball, and running track and having the success that they are, just shows you that good things come to those that are, focused and devoted to their cause. And now they're starting to reap what they sowed. And we, of course, they're young men, so we had to stay on them. But, see my oldest now playing wide receiver here at Florida A&M, and to see our youngest, who's a freshman, who's next in line, ready to make that next jump as a quarterback and a kicker. We'll see what's going to happen because the sky's the limit for him too. And we're truly thankful that they allowed Dad to drag them all over the country. But right now it's all about them.
Yeah. You have time for two more mailbag questions to close things out?
Yeah. 100%.
Appreciate it. So these last two, they come from one of the Temple football Facebook groups. This first one's from Jared Lawrence. And he says, this isn't Temple related, but I have a lot of family in Tallahassee. So I'm interested to know what type of offense Henry will be running at Florida A&M and if he has any goals for the season. I know you can't give away the playbook, obviously, but could you give him an idea of what you're looking to do and how you implement that?
Well, it's all about making sure you present multiple formations and personnel groupings. See, the one thing about college football that people forget, if you look at the NFL, we're in the NFL, we presented so many different looks. We want to make you have to spend overtime preparing for us. And that's the same thing we're going to do here at Florida A&M. I mean, we're going to play up tempo. We pretty much play a no huddle style offense.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're going to present you so many different looks. We want to make sure that we keep your defensive coordinator and the players up at night, just trying to think, how can we defense you? Because the four things I always tell people that when it comes to defense, these are the four things that they hate. They hate teams that play with speed. They hate teams that take away their vision. They hate teams that make them communicate. And to me, those are like the biggest three right there. Like it doesn't matter what the fourth is. If you take away those three, that takes away everything. But also the other thing is if you're able to utilize the space and put some of their most uncomfortable players in space. Defensive players hate space. That's why they always have to be hands-on. So we want to cause those four factors for defenses to have to play with. We're not going to play at your place. You're going to play at ours. And so that's our mentality because we want you to pick and choose what the poison is going to be. If you're going to load up the box, put 8 people in the box, we're going to throw the ball on you. If you play shell coverage, now we're going to pick you apart with our running game. So it's all about picking your poison and how do we get to that, different formations, different motions and shifts. We show so many different things. We want to make sure you're over preparing for yourself. And then all of a sudden, oh no, they brought in something new. So the thing is, we're going to have a multi-tiered offense, but if you want to focus on one area, hey, we love to spread you out and we're going to play fast.
Mm-hmm. Another one here is from Mark Clotterbaugh. And he says, John, I'm curious to hear Henry's view of NIL, name, image, and likeness, something that's obviously turned the college football world, turned the college athletics world, I don't want to say upside down, but it's that between that and the portal, obviously it's brought a lot of chaos. What are your views on it? I know it's not something you just talk about for 30 seconds and you just crystallize it that way, but how have you seen it affect the game? How will it affect you down there? There's just so many things to it. And he wanted to hear about your thoughts on NIL.
I'm truly fine with the fact that the players are finally, as far as when it comes to, receiving some type of payment or actually, I guess, being rewarded just for what they bring to the table.
Sure.
Because back in the day when we were playing, to be able to get a couple of dollars for, your jerseys being sold would have been pretty nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know what I mean? And so it's good to see the players actually getting their just due. But the thing is, to me, there has to be more structure.
Mm-hmm.
To me right now, it's just insane just how things are. You're a kid who goes from being 18 years old to all of a sudden you're getting a few $100,000 thrown at you. For me, that's the best and the worst place for young men to be, especially at this age, and even young women, because now the thing is you forget about the reason why you're into this sport, because it's still the sport first, because you can't take the money with you wherever you go. However, it helps you get a foot up once your career is done. To me, I've always said they need to structure and invest the money, create a trust to where based on the kids' a financial background and family, they release X amount of dollars to help them get ahead, to help take care of the family, to help keep them ahead. If they need a vehicle, yes, you can release that money. But the thing is, sometimes with a kid walking around with hundreds of thousands of dollars at one time, I'd rather see them, instead of them spending that money, to have that money invested for them.
Yeah.
If you need to hire somebody to do that, hire somebody to do just that. But to me, there needs to be more structure. So therefore the focus is kept on having the best career I can have, trying to get to the next level, but also making sure I get my education, which is first and foremost the most important. But to me, it alleviates the whole thing of it being a money chase, because that's pretty much what it is right now. There's no holds barred. And yes, coaches are doing it, and I feel the players should have the same rights as the coaches. But at the end of the day, to me, there needs to be more structure really on both sides as far as how players and coaches, because to me, coaches shouldn't be able to leave before their bowl games. They should have to close out their games before they're allowed to go to their next teams, because then if they don't do it, why are we so busy holding the players to that same accountability to make sure they play in the bowl games that their coaches aren't?
For you guys down there, is it going to be kind of like a double-edged sword thing? Because on one hand, if you guys have someone who has a great season, that any high major coach could say, why am I going to sign 25 kids this year where I could sign maybe 12 high scorers? And I'm going to go get this kid from Florida A&M who I already know has played against some pretty good competition. The learning curve won't be as high, so you may lose a couple of guys. Or you guys could benefit from it where, maybe a kid goes to Alabama and says, I'm stuck behind the future Derrick Henry or Josh Jacobs, but I'm going to go down to the FCS level and kill it, and those guys get to the NFL too. Is it kind of a double-edged sword for you guys in that way, potentially?
100% it is. Because again, when we have success, especially this past year, winning the Black College National Championship,
Yeah.
we lost a number of players to Power Four teams,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. These guys earned the opportunity to play at that next level up when it comes to competition and being in that type of program. And hey, we're happy for those guys because it only helps market us as that place that you can use as a stepping stone to come in and have success, win a lot of games. And if it's a place where you don't want to leave, because again, you're in Tallahassee, Florida, one of the best college football markets as far as in the land. And if you don't want to leave, you can always stay and finish out your career and know you're going to be a part of a winning program. Because when it comes to pro football, they want to invest into winning.
Yeah.
And if you're a player or a coach, you're in the right spot. But unfortunately, the one part that I hate about the whole transfer portal and everything that's taken place is the impact that it's had on high school players.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
just as you mentioned, if I'm a coach and I can get a player who's 19, 20 years old, who has 2-3 years of experience, has a red shirt, and still 2-3 years remaining because of COVID, why not that player instead of trying to still develop a player at this moment? So I do understand where guys are coming from. However, I still feel there is still a space for development because once those guys do leave, you do need the next crop of players to be able to step up, be ready to go, who are invested into you, and hopefully you can keep them. But just as you hear a lot of coaches saying, why would I get a high school player where he's only going to come have success after 1 year after we've invested so much and then he's gone, where I can have a guy that's been invested into, has experience also, understands the college game, and is also rigid and physically prepared to go out and have success and keep that winning program and formula that we have taking place. They can come in right away, play, and make an impact. But right now, when you look at college football, it's such a fast food mentality.
Yeah.
But you got to adjust with it. You got to adjust with it, or if not, you'll get left behind.
Yeah. One last one for you, Henry. We've been doing this thing for the summer, calling it our Al Scoop Summer Madness food bracket, like an NCAA tournament style type of thing. Just keep people engaged over the summer and matching them up and just getting some fun conversation going. The two teams that are left in the championship this week, one place that's here now that's really popular, Maxie's, was not around when you and I were students, and against Richie's, which I think Richie's existed when we were students here in the 90s. Do you remember like any favorite places that you ate at that stand out to you?
Owl's Nest, man. Owl's Nest all day. I mean, we talk about the double cheesesteaks and the vanilla shakes and the combos with the fries that we used to get there all the time. Remember Salad Alley used to be the hangout back in the day.
That's essentially where Max's is now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I used to be the hangout on campus and people used to love it. But you know how it is when you go to Philly and you experience it all back in the 90s. What's the one place that we all could not live without? And for me, it was Wawa. And to see Wawa's expanding, we're actually getting a Wawa here in Tallahassee coming up here soon. And I know we can't wait for the opening because we're going to be first in line to get our hoagies and everything else. And hopefully they have the right tasty cakes, not this second chain of tasty cakes that they get down south. But we want the originals, the ones that we had when we were there on North Broad Street and out there in Penn's Landing when I used to go to Wawa's to wash my car and make sure I grabbed a hoagie on the way home.
Yeah.
So just bring back those memories, man. I cannot live without the Owl's Nest. That was always my go-to. Jimmy's Truck. I can't forget about Jimmy's Truck. Sorry about that.
I was dying on this hill because my younger guys they weren't around for this. Do you remember the place? And it took me weeks to remember or figure out what the name of the place was. You probably didn't eat there all that much because it wasn't super healthy. Do you remember the place that had Chinese food and donuts? It was called General Express and Boston Donut. And I was trying to explain that to my step. They're like, no, that's not. Like, I was like, no, it existed. You could go in, buy like shrimp lo mein, 2 jelly donuts, and then you just hate yourself after. But like, you're like, whatever. Do you remember that place?
Yeah, it was the Dunkin' Donuts. It was Dunkin' Donuts that was there, right?
It was called General Express. There was General Express.
General Tso's Chicken.
Yes.
General Express.
Yes. Yeah. I was trying to explain that to my younger guys, and I couldn't remember the name of it, and somebody else remembered it. But, Henry, this has been awesome, man. I know you're busy. I got to let you go. Otherwise, we could talk all day. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to us, and best of luck to you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon. Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Hey, John, it's always been a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for having me on, man. It's always awesome to talk Temple, man, and great to talk to you as well. Thank you, brother.
Again, a huge thank you to Henry Burris. Like I said, could have talked to him all day. He is as genuine as he sounds. And again, so many of you have probably met him over the years, and he is just very much the real deal. He's had just such a great career, has moved around, has a great family, is going to get the chance, as he just talked about now, to coach one of his sons. And both sons are in the game now and playing. And always great to catch up with him. So hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. Just a few quick updates before we close out episode 46. Again, we're approaching season 10. So 10 seasons of The Scoop almost upon us. So season 9, episode 46, we'll flip the calendar over to season 10 once August comes around. Again, keep your eyes peeled for our preseason football coverage. We should have position previews coming your way. We should have the preseason practice schedule soon and the schedule for media availability. So we'll pass that along as soon as we get it. I can't think of a position battle that's not really up for grabs and where there aren't a lot of names and faces and competition in the mix. So we'll have plenty to talk about this August. Along those lines with football, Temple does now have 6 verbal commitments. Since the last time we talked to you, Ramir Hardy, a wideout from St. Joe's Prep, became Temple's 6th class of 2025 verbal commitment. So that was kind of being hinted at. We kind of sort of knew that was coming. Good local player that Temple gets in the mix. Again, 6 verbals now for Temple from the 2025 class. We'll keep you updated on any future commitments that may come their way over the next couple of weeks. Just a couple of basketball recruiting updates to let you know about. Temple has offered Gabe Tanner, KJ Cochran's backcourt mate at the Perkiomen School. He's had a good summer, so a name to keep an eye on there. Those guys both spend time on the ball at the Perkiomen School. Really good player, 3-level scorer. Haven't had the chance to talk to him yet. A lot of people I've talked to about Gabe speak very, very highly of him, both as a player on the court, winner off the court. A name to keep an eye on there. Another name, Temple just offered Cam Miles, a 6'3" point guard from down in Florida, who's going to be at IMG this coming season. Temple's known about him for a little while. He's got a bunch of offers, starting to get some offers from programs in the American, like ECU, Charlotte. Adam Fisher just watched him on the Under Armour circuit, and Temple pulled the trigger on an offer. So a couple of other names to keep an eye on. And on next week's episode, we're going to be talking to Jameel Brown. I talked to Jameel for the Getting to Know the Owls series when he first committed. We had a great conversation over the phone, but I'll be over at the facility later on this week to talk to Jameel and just about growing up in Philly, playing locally here as one of the better players in his class after playing at Penn State. He's back at Temple. A lot of you know his story, but I'll be able to ask Jameel now about a few weeks of practice, what he's seen from the newcomers, what he's seen in terms of acclimating himself to the program here. So you guys can look forward to that. Really looking forward to that conversation. Jameel's an awesome interview, so hopefully you guys will enjoy that as well. And in the Scoop Summertime Madness food bracket, keep your eyes peeled for the voting. It's down to Richie's against Maxie's. So the 2 stalwarts that Declan has talked about. Keep your eye out for voting. It'll be on our socials, @alscoop_com on Twitter, on Instagram. You'll have opportunities to vote. So a little bit of old school versus sort of old school / new school. As Henry and I were just talking about, Al's Nest was the prime pizza place on campus, and now Maxie's certainly is. So if you have fun with this, log on and vote. Like I say, you can vote on Twitter. You can vote on Instagram. Declan will have news about that on the message boards. If you're an Al Scoop subscriber, again, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and you'll know how to vote. So big thank you once again to Henry Burris for spending as much time with me as he did. Always great catching up with him. Hope you guys are all having and continuing to have a great summer. Starting to go by fast. Again, preseason camp's going to be here before you know it. So thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Scoop. We'll have a lot more for you next week, and we shall talk to you soon.